Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. It happened in the middle of a Thursday evening, the kind of night that should have been ordinary. We were sitting in the living room, the TV humming in the background, when she threw the words at me like a weapon she thought couldn't miss. If you're jealous, you can leave. For a second, I just looked at her. She leaned back on the couch, arms folded, lips curled into a smirk that told me she thought she had just won. She expected me to argue, to demand answers, to prove that I still cared enough to fight. She wanted me to beg, to reassure her that she was worth the storm. Instead, I stood up, calm. No raised voice, no accusation. I picked up my jacket, slid my phone into my pocket, and said nothing. Her smirk faltered. She asked where I was going, but I didn't answer. I walked out the door with the quiet finality of a man who had already made his decision long before she dared me to. On the drive, my phone buzzed twice. Then 3 times. Her name lit up the screen, followed by a string of messages. I didn't read them. Instead, I pressed one button, and just like that, she was gone. Blocked. Removed. Silenced. For years, she had relied on the power of her tears, her last-minute apologies, her sudden claims of need. But not this time. I cut her off before she could start. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was freedom. I pulled into a gas station, bought a coffee, and for the first time in a long time, breathed without weight on my chest. The world outside was moving as it always had, but mine had shifted in an instant. She thought her words were a bluff I'd never call. Instead, I turned them into a sentence she couldn't escape. That night, I checked into a small hotel on the edge of town. No messages, no calls, no explanations. Just a quiet room and the knowledge that I had finally done what she never believed I would. She had drawn the line, thinking I'd stay behind it. But she forgot one thing. When you dare a man to leave, you'd better be ready to watch the door close. And as I lay in that hotel bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized something even sharper. She wasn't the one who had dismissed me. I was the one who had dismissed her. Because the moment I blocked her, she didn't just lose me. She lost the audience for her performance. By the next morning, I knew she had already started unraveling. When someone builds their entire sense of control around the idea that you'll always come back, silence becomes the cruelest punishment. I didn't send her a message. I didn't answer her calls. I didn't even glance at the block number glowing on my screen when she tried again from another phone. My silence wasn't just absence. It was a wall she couldn't climb. By noon, the messages started arriving through mutual friends. One buddy texted me, saying she'd reached out, worried, asking if I was safe. I told him calmly that I was fine, just taking time for myself. He didn't press. He knew me well enough to hear the truth behind those words. Later, another friend called, saying she had asked them to check in. I smiled quietly, imagining her pacing the room, realizing that her usual tricks weren't working. She was trying to reach me indirectly now, playing the victim in a story she once directed with confidence. But the narrative was no longer hers. When people asked me what was going on, I didn't explain. I simply said, sometimes people get exactly what they ask for. It was enough. Their silence told me they understood more than she wanted them to. That evening, I went back to the house to grab a few things. She wasn't expecting me. Her car was in the driveway, lights on in the living room. I stepped inside, moved quickly, collected only what I needed. She called my name from the couch, her voice sharp at first, then soft when she realized I wasn't stopping. I didn't respond. I carried the bag out, closed the door behind me, and left her sitting in the silence I had created. On the drive back, I thought about the way her face had looked when she realized I wasn't staying. Not angry, not even shocked. Just pale, like someone who had underestimated the strength of a man who no longer cared. The next day, she tried again. This time, through a mutual acquaintance at work. They asked if I wanted to meet for lunch, clearly speaking on her behalf. I declined politely, telling them I had other plans. In truth, I sat alone in a quiet diner, drinking black coffee, enjoying the peace she had never believed I'd choose over her chaos. By the end of that week, she wasn't just frustrated. She was afraid. Afraid of a silence that didn't feel temporary. Afraid of a man she could no longer predict. And the thing about fear is simple. Once it enters the game is already lost. By the 3rd week, her desperation was no longer subtle. She found new ways to reach me, using numbers I didn't recognize, emails from accounts I knew weren't hers. At first, the messages were short. Can we talk? Please answer. When I ignored them, they grew longer, paragraphs spilling across the screen like confessions she had never intended to make. One night, a mutual friend sent me a screenshot. It was a message she had asked them to forward. In it, she wrote that she was sorry, that she hadn't meant what she said, that she only wanted to get a reaction out of me. She admitted that she thought I would fight for her, that she expected me to prove my jealousy meant love. And when I didn't, when I walked away, she realized she had miscalculated. I stared at the message for a long moment, then closed it without replying. My silence was the only answer she would get. The friend asked if I wanted them to respond on my behalf. I told them no. The message had already served its purpose. It showed me what I needed to see: the cracks in her mask, the fear in her voice, the beginning of her collapse. That weekend, I ran into another acquaintance who mentioned she had been talking about me. Not proudly, not with the arrogance she once carried, but nervously. She was telling people I was acting cold, that I had shut her out completely. What she didn't realize was that the more she spoke, the more people began to wonder why. A man doesn't become silent for no reason. A man doesn't walk away unless something broke long before the silence began. She tried one more angle that week. An email came through late at night, not from her account, but from a shared one we had once used for bills. The subject line was simple: I need you. Inside, the words bled desperation. She said she couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't focus. She said she missed me, needed me, wanted to fix everything. I read it once, calmly, then deleted it. No reply, no acknowledgement. I let the silence do what it always does: turn her own words into weapons against her. By then, it wasn't about anger anymore. It wasn't about revenge. It was about something cleaner. She had thrown her challenge at me: leave if you're jealous, and I had left. Every step after that was her realizing I wasn't coming back. And the silence she once thought was weakness had become the loudest truth of all. It was only a matter of time before she showed up. When silence stretches too long, people like her can't sit still. They need an audience, someone to witness the performance. I heard the knock on my door one Saturday afternoon, sharp at first, then softer, almost hesitant. I opened it and found her standing there, makeup carefully done, smile trembling like she wasn't sure which mask to wear. She said she just wanted to talk. Her voice carried that false confidence, the same tone she used to win arguments in the past. But I didn't invite her in. I stepped aside just enough to show I wasn't blocking the doorway, but I didn't move. She shifted nervously, waiting for warmth, for some sign that the door was more than a door. It wasn't. Finally, she walked inside, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. She glanced around, noticing the changes. A few empty shelves, a missing photo, her favorite blanket gone from the couch. She tried to laugh it off, asked if I was redecorating. I didn't answer. I let her words fall into the silence, where they dissolved on their own. She sat down, crossed her legs, and started talking. Apologies, excuses, half-truths blended into one long stream. She said she didn't mean what she said that night. She said she had only been testing me. She said she thought jealousy was proof of love. Her words twisted, bent, searching for a way back into my life. I let her speak. I didn't interrupt, didn't argue, didn't confirm or deny. I simply listened with the calm stillness of someone who had already decided. And that silence cut deeper than any harsh reply could. She began to stumble, her words losing rhythm, her confidence cracking. When she finally stopped, she looked at me with wide, wet eyes, expecting something, anything, that would tell her she still had a place in my world. Instead, I stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. I didn't say a word. Her face paled. She tried to smile again, weaker this time, asked if I could at least give her a chance to explain. I held the door steady, silent. After a long pause, she stood, her heels clicking again, this time heavier, slower, like a march of defeat. She stepped outside, turned back as if searching for a final look that might break me. But I had nothing left to give. I closed the door quietly, the click of the lock echoing louder than her entire visit. And in that moment, she realized what she had never believed before. Words had lost their power. Tears had lost their weight. Her presence no longer mattered. Because when silence becomes stronger than noise, the performance ends. It didn't surprise me when the phone calls from her family started. That's how it always goes. When silence cuts too deep, People like her scramble for reinforcements. The first was her sister, who asked if I had really just walked away. I told her the truth in the simplest way possible. I only did what I was told. She paused, confused, pressed for more, but I didn't elaborate. The silence after my words spoke for itself. Next came her mother. She called with that edge of disappointment layered under forced politeness. She said her daughter was hurt, that she didn't understand why I was being so cold. I listened, then asked a single question. Did she tell you what she said to me before I left? The silence on the other end told me everything. Of course she hadn't. Of course she painted herself as the victim, leaving out the part where she dared me to go. Her friends tried too. A few reached out casually, testing the waters, pretending to check in. I knew she had sent them. They said things like, "She's going through a lot," or "Maybe she didn't mean it." I smiled at their words, thanked them politely, then ended the calls. Every time, I gave them nothing to carry back to her except the weight of my silence. The more she pushed through others, the weaker her image became. Whispers started turning against her. People began asking questions she didn't want to answer. If I was truly the villain she claimed, why was I so calm? Why wasn't I angry, desperate, or defensive? Why did I look like the one who had finally found peace? By the second week, her attempts to control the narrative had backfired. I heard from a mutual friend that she'd been crying about how everyone was taking my side. But I hadn't asked anyone to take sides. I hadn't even spoken more than a handful of sentences to anyone. The truth was simple. She was losing control of the story because for once, I refused to play my part in it. One evening, I walked into a bar near the office. A couple of acquaintances were there, people who knew both of us. They asked how I was doing. I told them honestly, better than I've been in years. That was it. Their nods, their small smiles, told me they understood. And I knew word would get back to her. The image she had built, of being the one in charge, the one untouchable, was starting to fracture. And she hated it. Because silence doesn't just starve manipulation. It exposes it. By the 6th week, her tactics had shifted again. The whispers hadn't worked. The family hadn't worked. So she returned to what she thought was her strongest weapon, nostalgia. She began sending old photos through mutual contacts, snapshots of vacations, parties, nights we once shared. In every picture, she wrote the same message. Remember this? We were happy then. I looked at the images briefly, then closed them. The past wasn't a chain on my wrist anymore. It was a weight I had already set down. She didn't understand that reminding me of old memories only showed me how far we had fallen and how little of that happiness had survived her arrogance. One evening, I went back to the house to collect more of my things. She was waiting. The lights were dim, soft music playing, her perfume heavy in the air. She wore the dress she had on the night we first met, a deliberate choice, a costume meant to take me back in time. She smiled nervously, poured a glass of wine, and told me she wanted to start fresh. I walked past her, gathered my things, and packed them into a bag. She tried again, stepping closer, brushing her hand against my arm, her voice soft, trembling. She said she missed me. She said she needed me. She said she was ready to change. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I let her hand rest there until it fell away on its own. The silence between us was colder than rejection, heavier than anger. It told her exactly what she didn't want to hear, that she no longer had power over me. Her eyes glistened, her lips trembled. For a moment, I thought she might drop the act entirely. But then she forced a smile, whispered that she knew I still loved her. I zipped my bag, slung it over my shoulder, and walked to the door. I didn't argue. I didn't confirm or deny. I just left her standing there, staring at the space I had once filled. That night, I lay in a different bed, in a different room, free from the perfume, the wine, the staged attempts to recreate what she had already destroyed. For the first time, I slept deeply. No dreams, no noise, just silence. And somewhere across town, I knew she was awake, staring into the dark, realizing the truth she had spent weeks trying to avoid. You can't resurrect what you buried yourself. The breaking point came one evening when I stopped by to collect the last of my things. I hadn't planned on staying long, just a quick sweep of the drawers and the closet. But she was waiting, her face tight, her eyes wild with sleeplessness. The second I stepped through the door, she exploded. She accused me of being cruel, of abandoning her, of humiliating her in front of everyone. Her words tumbled out fast, sharp, desperate. She shouted that I never loved her, that I was destroying what we had built. She hurled every accusation she could find, like throwing glass at a wall, hoping something would break. I stood in the middle of the storm, calm, unmoved. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I let her words bounce off the silence I carried with me. And the longer I stood there, the louder she got, until her own voice cracked under the weight of her fury. She demanded answers, but I gave her none. She wanted me to argue, to show anger, to prove that I still cared enough to fight. But I wasn't fighting anymore. I was done. And that was when her rage cracked into something weaker: tears. She dropped onto the couch, sobbing, clutching at the cushions like they could anchor her. She said she couldn't understand why I was doing this, why I had turned into someone she didn't recognize. I finished packing the bag, zipped it shut, and looked at her for the last time. Her face was wet, her eyes hollow, her voice breaking. She begged me to say something, anything. I gave her silence. And in that silence, she finally saw what I had seen weeks ago. This was over. When I walked out, she didn't follow. She stayed there, small and broken in the room that once belonged to both of us. The door closed behind me with a soft click, not a slam, not a gesture of anger, just finality. On the drive back, I thought about her screams, her tears, her accusations. None of it pierced me. None of it mattered. Because the truth was simple, her chaos no longer touched me. And for the first time in years, I felt untouchable. After that night, something in me shifted for good. It wasn't just about walking away anymore. It was about walking into something new. I started hitting the gym harder, pushing myself until my muscles ached and the sweat cleared my head. I picked up old hobbies I had abandoned years ago, dusted off my guitar, signed up for a boxing class, started running at dawn. Every day felt sharper, cleaner, as if I was reclaiming pieces of myself that had been buried under years of her dismissals. I changed my circle too. The old routine of couples dinners and mutual friends faded. I reached out to people I hadn't seen in years, guys I used to work with, neighbors who had always invited me out, but I never joined. We grabbed beers, caught games, went fishing on weekends. Slowly, I realized how much of life I had missed while orbiting around someone who never valued the gravity I gave her. And word traveled. I knew it because one of her friends tried to bait me, casually mentioning that she had heard I was living it up. I just smiled and said, "I'm finally living." That line must have made it back to her, because not long after, I saw her name pop up in mutual conversations again, this time laced with bitterness. She was telling people I had changed, that I wasn't the man she once knew. She was right. I wasn't. The physical changes were just as sharp. I bought new clothes, cut my hair differently, even changed the cologne I wore. I wanted nothing that reminded me of who I had been with her. The man she had dismissed so casually was gone. The one replacing him wasn't angry, wasn't broken. He was untouchable. One evening, I ran into her by accident. A grocery store aisle, nothing dramatic. She froze, staring at me like she didn't recognize the man standing in front of her. I nodded politely, walked past her, and didn't look back. She stood there in silence, holding a basket, her face pale. That moment told her everything she needed to know. I wasn't hers to reach anymore. Because leaving isn't just walking out a door. It's building a life so far ahead that the person behind you can never catch up. Her final move came exactly the way I expected. Desperation disguised as sincerity. One night, she showed up at my place. No makeup, no perfume, just tears already streaking her face. She said she couldn't take the silence anymore. She said she had been wrong, that she had pushed too far, that she only wanted me back. She promised everything she thought I wanted to hear. That she would change, that she would listen, that she would give me the respect she had denied for years. Her words tumbled out, shaking, as if she finally understood how fragile her position had become. I let her speak. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, listening without interrupting. The man I used to be would have bent at the sound of her voice, would have searched for a way to believe her. But that man no longer lived here. When she was finished, she stepped closer, reaching for my hand. I didn't pull away, but I didn't take hers either. I looked at her and said, "You're not too late because I'm angry. You're too late because I'm done." The words hit harder than any silence I had given her before. Her eyes widened, her lips parted, but no sound came out. She had prepared for resistance, for argument, even for rage. But she wasn't prepared for calm dismissal. I told her the truth she had avoided all along. That it wasn't her tears that mattered now. It wasn't her promises. It was the simple fact that while she was busy playing games, I had built a life without her in it. A life I wasn't going to trade for second chances. She tried one last line, whispering that she needed me. But the truth was obvious in that moment. She didn't need me. She needed the man who used to orbit her world. The man who no longer existed. I stepped back, closed the door, and left her standing on the porch. Through the glass, I saw her crumple, her shoulders shaking, her body small against the night. But I didn't move. I didn't open the door again. Because the cruelest cut isn't walking away in anger. It's walking away in peace, leaving them to fight a battle that no longer exists. The last time I saw her was a week later. She didn't come crying this time, didn't scream or beg. She showed up quietly, standing outside my door like a shadow. When I opened it, she looked different, drained, hollow, like someone who had been living on broken sleep and unanswered questions. She asked if I could spare 5 minutes. I stepped aside, not to invite her in, but to give her space to say what she came to say. She stood in the entryway, her voice trembling. She said she knew she had ruined everything. She admitted she had taken me for granted, that she had been cruel, careless, arrogant. She said she just wanted one more chance. Not even a full chance, just a moment to prove she could be different. I watched her carefully, letting the silence hang between us. For the first time, she wasn't performing. The words were real. The regret was real. But reality doesn't erase damage. Reality doesn't rebuild what's already been burned to ash. I told her the truth in the calmest voice I had. You didn't lose me because of one mistake. You lost me because you thought I'd never leave. Her breath caught, her shoulders collapsed, and in that single instant she understood. It wasn't about jealousy or arguments or even betrayal. It was about something simpler. She had gambled my love against her pride, and she lost. She whispered that she still loved me. I shook my head slowly. Love isn't the word anymore. That was it. No dramatic exit, no raised voice, no grand speech. Just a quiet line that cut deeper than anything I could have shouted. I stepped back inside, closed the door, and locked it. This time, I didn't check the window. I didn't wait to see if she stayed or left. Her presence no longer mattered. The next morning, I woke up to the sunlight spilling across a clean room, my phone free of her name, my mind clear. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about her at all. I wasn't wondering what she would say or do. I wasn't planning my next move around her moods. I was free, and that freedom didn't come from revenge or anger or even justice. It came from silence. The kind that erases, the kind that heals, the kind that speaks louder than any final argument ever could. Because in the end, she told me I could leave. And I did. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.